Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast and YouTube blog from Germany. Today bringing you another interview in our series with investinhessen.com, the state where Frankfurt is located. You know, we bring you always interesting startups looking for international expansion, maybe looking for investors and international cooperation partners. I'm very happy to have Sebastian as a guest here on Startuprad.io, your startup podcast and YouTube blog from Germany, as well as the world's first internet radio station dedicated to startups and tech companies. If you have not already done so, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button and leave us a nice comment. As always, there will be a link down here in the show notes where you can find everything we talked about, as well as Sebastian's LinkedIn profile and his company website. Sebastian, how you doing?
Hi, Joe. I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me on your show.
Totally my pleasure. It was long in the making, but we get to this soon after. We may say that you are the founder of what some people may call a prop tech called Homefully, headquartered here in Frankfurt. And as always, I have been stalking you a little bit on LinkedIn. And as always, your LinkedIn profile will be linked down here in the show notes. There, depending on the service you are listening to this, there's a link. It's either working or not working, not our choice. And there you'll find the blog post. And in the blog post, there is the link to your LinkedIn profile. So people can link out directly to you or reach out directly to you on LinkedIn. Did I just make up another word? I don't know. Basically, I've seen a lot of interesting stops along your way. I realize you went to university in Cologne. Despite that, you went to a school in Thailand. You went to university in mainland China, Dongbei, in Warsaw, and University of North Florida. So tell us first a little bit what you studied and how it led you to become the founder and CEO of Homefully.
Yeah, happy to do so. I think you listed a lot of stops along the way in a very correct order already. So first of all, I did during my bachelor's degree, I studied international business, a semester abroad in Thailand. So that was my first longer stay abroad. After my bachelor's degree, I started working in asset management for a wealth management company in Singapore. So we did help German and Swiss clients to invest in Asian Pacific stocks. And I also helped building an Asia Pacific value fund with stocks, basically focusing on the Asia Pacific region. Afterwards, I did an international MBA, and this MBA program had several stations. So it started in Cologne, the University of Cologne, followed by a semester in Warsaw, at the University of Warsaw, then a summer school in China, mainland China, in Dalian. And it finished with the master thesis in Florida, at the University of North Florida. So I was collecting quite a lot of different countries and quite a lot of different university and work arrangements along the way.
I actually found your stop in Thailand very intriguing. What I had in mind was you laying on the beach with the tablet and studying there. I do assume it was not that way, but that was the picture I had in my mind. We do have a lot of listeners on Himalaya from mainland China. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience at Dalian?
So in Dalian, we had 3 months of university there. And it was a really interesting time. We were coming directly from Poland, transitioning to China. And it was a very exciting time because suddenly you're realizing, and this was for me the very first time that I have realized that when traveling abroad, you're not understanding the language. You're not understanding anything at all. Because at this point we were not in a big city, at least considering the fact that a 6 or 7 million city with 6 or 7 million inhabitants in China is not considered a big city. So you don't have a big international population there. You don't have really an expat scene there, despite being such a big city for European standards. So it was really, really interesting, and we got a lot of help and support from our fellow students there who were able to speak Chinese and who were able to speak Mandarin. And this was for me the very first time that I really had to rely on my fellow students there, because you are getting exposed to a world where you really don't understand anything at all out of sudden, where no one speaks English, where no sign is in English, and you're just realizing, okay, this is a complete.
I really feel that. I've lived in Beijing. Well, Beijing. I love Beijing. I still miss it. But what helped me a lot were the people were kind and understanding when I tried out my Mandarin. It got better over time, but at the end, I was still only able to say very stupid things like, "I want to buy that. This is too expensive. I want to take a cab to this and that place," and so on and so forth. That was really nice. And what's also funny is I was once there ordering beer, and I held up my index finger and my thumb, which is the Chinese symbol for eight. So they gave us 8 beer for 2 guys. That was one of my funniest experiences in China. But they smiled, nodded, and gave us 8 beer. Just amazing place. Let us get a little bit serious into business. As you said, value investing. We'll have a link down here in the show notes. It's a certain approach for investing, and I do see you've also made some stints at investment banking here in Frankfurt. Anything you learned there like really useful, except for working long hours and really testing the limit of Excel?
You're right. That's also the reason why I came back to Germany, back to Frankfurt. I used to work in a job in investment banking consulting. Um, I think this industry is still a very, very interesting industry. I mean, you have a steep learning curve. I was there for almost 3 years working as a consultant there. Um, at some point, I think you have to decide if this is the industry you want to stay in. Like you said, long hours. I mean, you get paid above average. You need to have, especially an interest for such a fast-paced environment. That's for sure. You also need to have interest in financial and capital markets. But I think it's a really good industry to learn and to grow. But for me personally, I always had the idea to start my own business, to start something on my own, to start the entrepreneurial journey. So for me, this was a really good time where I learned a lot apart from financial modeling in Excel. Um, so I think when you enter this industry, you have to be very, very clear on what you're getting out of it and what you want to get out of it, and then you have to decide at some point if you want to leave after 2 or 3 years, really take advantage of that learning experience, or if you want to stay in that industry and make like really work up your career and work up in the ranks. So I think both options are possible.
Even though we did not discuss this, but you gave me a great launch point to ask why you decided to leave and start Homefully. It just worked out wonderfully. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I did start Homefully essentially as a side business with my co-founder at this point. So we never really intended in the first place to build a market-leading startup here. So I came from abroad. I always lived in different co-living arrangements back then when I was studying and working abroad. And I came back to Frankfurt, I came back to Germany, and I realized, okay, the current real estate market here is not really comparable to what I have experienced abroad. So there were almost no places that offered furnished living. A lot of places that I looked at didn't even have a kitchen, and that was something that I wasn't really used to, or that what I was not really expecting at this point. So we decided.
We may add for everybody who's listening to this or watching this from abroad. So basically, you're not referring that there was a apartment layout without a kitchen, but in Germany you have those built-in kitchens. That means all the installation, all the plugs, water, wastewater, energy, they're all there, but you still have to put in all your furniture, all your electrical. All your electro stuff like the fridge, like the oven, and so on and so forth, and you have to pay for it yourself. German thing, we don't get into details, but basically the place is there, but the furniture is missing. That's what you're referring to, right?
Exactly. And I lived in different countries. I moved around quite a lot. I moved on average every 6 months to another place. So I was used to get that kind of flexibility, which I didn't really see in the German real estate market. So we decided to launch homefully, our co-living approach, as a side business first, and then it accelerated and it grew and grew. And at some point, I decided, okay, I need to decide if I want to continue doing my job, if I want to continue being employed, or if I want to do that full time. And I decided to go all in, take the rest, take the risk, quit my job, and start doing homefully full time.
I see you guys are active in Germany as well as Switzerland. Big gritty to Switzerland here. I was wondering, did you feel any change over the last year, especially like an uptick in requests in tenants from the UK after Brexit or something like this?
So we always had a rather big crowd, a rather big customer base coming from abroad. So when you look at our portfolio, at our customer base, we have roughly 50% that are German nationals, and the other 50% are internationals and expats. So mostly those 50% like internationals are from other European countries, so Italy, Spain, France, and the UK. I don't know exactly when the Brexit discussions started. I think it started at some point already back in 2013 and or 14. But we didn't really see a big change. We always had a pretty good amount of internationals coming from the UK. But I don't think we saw this like huge wave at some point of like people from Britain flooding the financial center of Frankfurt.
Mm-hmm. I see. Let us now, after we've like all the macro stuff out of the way, let us get into the micro stuff, like what you guys are actually offering. Because my understanding is you're not building like big apartment blocks with apartments with a lot of bedrooms and say, okay, that's co-living, go guys, that's it. You have a different approach, right?
Essentially, we do both. So our approach is to work with existing inventory that is already built, that is already on the market. But we're also working with institutional investors and project developers to work on hopefully project developments in cities, in prime locations. And we are focusing on very central locations and on the most vibrant neighborhoods to create co-living spaces where they are needed the most, essentially. So this is something that I think differentiates us from the competition, because they either do one or the other, and we basically work with both approaches in this case.
I see. So talking about the most vibrant neighborhoods, my question would be, how do you actually pinpoint the most vibrant neighborhoods? For example, in Frankfurt, I would say Bahnhofsviertel, the red light district around Central Station, is pretty fancy. There was even an article in the New York Times talking about that. That's a pretty good hint. Maybe it's already too fancy, but how do you actually do that in other cities? For example, somebody who's moving to Zurich, how do they find out what's the hot, what's the next big place to be?
Using two approaches simultaneously. So first of all, we're having a pretty clear framework of KPIs, how we rank certain parts of a city on a micro level. And on the other hand, we are already in the business for almost 5 years now. So we already bring in quite a good amount of experience. So we deem ourselves, not me personally on this level, but our team of community managers, we see them as experts for that particular city. So we can offer a broad range of different co-living spaces throughout that particular city. And like you already mentioned, you have very different kind of neighborhoods within one city. You have in Frankfurt, for instance, the Bahnhofsviertel neighborhood, which is very urban, very central. Like you need to want to live in that particular place. And you also have, for instance, the West End area, where it's a bit more quiet, where it's also very central. And then we basically choose, or we pick automatically, depending on your preferences, the neighborhood or the area or the co-living space that fits you the most ideal. That's kind of like our approach in this case.
I had another question when you've been talking, like you work with project developers basically to get a project like a building developed to your needs. I would be curious, where are you looking around, and if this interview right now is heard by a project developer somewhere in the US, in Asia, somewhere else in Europe, would you be open to talk to them as well?
Absolutely. So we are currently targeting the top 7 cities in Germany. So the top 7 are essentially the 7 biggest cities: Frankfurt, Munich, Berlin, Hamburg, Stuttgart, Cologne, and Düsseldorf. But we're also interested in working together with project developers in other big European metropolises. For instance, in Zurich, we already have our first international hub. And we also plan to expand further into new international cities and international markets within 2021 and following.
Something you have in mind there? Just instant thought would be something like Paris, Barcelona, Madrid, stuff like that.
So Paris is very much on our list. Barcelona, I think it's a really great city, a really great spot for co-living in general. Not only because of the weather, but because it's like a very, very vibrant tech scene that is growing there. So yeah, absolutely. Those kind of cities are the ones that we are currently looking at, and that we are also currently targeting.
We recently talked to Sebastian from Sleeves Up co-working spaces here in Frankfurt, and he talked about that he's more interested in debt financing because his co-living spaces are usually a case for the normal bank credit. What would be your approach? More equity or single financing of debt financing of single projects?
We were bootstrapped for the very first 2 years. So we put in our own money and we grew organically. And after 2 years, we realized, okay, capital is our bottleneck when it comes to expansion. And we raised our first round from venture capitalists. So we did our first round with HV Capital in early 2018. And that's the way we grew forward. We're planning to raise a new round in this year. And we're looking actually for a mixture of debt and equity financing, because we have a certain part of our business that is ideally suitable for equity financing. For instance, when you are building, like in our case, your own technology, when you are investing in the operational part of the business and into the brand. And on the other hand, we're also looking for debt financing when it comes to jointly developing those projects together with either a big real estate institutional investor or a project developer, because this part is more suitable or can also be suitable for debt financing. A third part that is maybe not part of the traditional financing scheme is something that we call committed capital. So we're also looking for a strategic partner in the real estate world, where we basically bring in our operational excellence, our operational approach, and the real estate partner is bringing in their asset, their real estate asset, part of their portfolio, and then we jointly develop this case together. So we bring in our co-living approach, and they bring in committed capital in form of a real estate asset.
Mm-hmm. I see. So you're looking for many different investors in many different forms, and you're open for real estate investors, for project developers in the real estate space, as well as institutional investors. I can see the charm for institutional investors, for example, like a pension fund who actually owns a building. They work with you and you help them to get it rented out on a normal price on a constant basis, and they generate a constant cash flow. I do see the utility for both sides there. Let us quickly talk a little bit about who is actually living in your spaces and how the experience would be for a person like this. Let's say you're living right now in Barcelona and you just want to move to Frankfurt and using homefully. How would you start, and what's the usual customer journey there until they actually get the key?
So I think the use case that you're just describing is perfectly for this. So ideally, as a homefully customer, you have a medium to long-term stay in mind. So we don't rent out our co-living spaces on a day-to-day basis. We start with a 3-month minimum stay, and you can essentially stay with us for as long as you want. So we see ourselves sort of like a community builder, and we want to foster those relationships that basically occur when you live together with other people that are in the same basically in the same period of time or in the same period of your life. So our customer, on average, they are in between their early to mid 20s to their early mid 30s. Many of them, half of them, have an international background. And you basically apply through our website. So you don't need to travel to Frankfurt. You don't need to physically look at the space. You can pretty much do everything online. And the entire process, from looking at the apartment to applying the apartment to signing the rental contract, until your move-in date is being scheduled, until you actually move in at some point in the future, is being done entirely digital and 100% online.
What would be a potential tenant need to show you? I know in Germany, if you rent an apartment from like not an institutional investor, they usually do have a very long list of requirements, for the very simple reason, when you want living in an apartment in Germany, it's very hard to get you out. So they do all their due diligence before. Is it also like a meter-long list of stuff people have to show you before they can move in there?
We do the approach in a I would say in a much more consumer-friendly way. So first of all, we don't discriminate. We don't discriminate by language. We don't discriminate by nationality. We make it much easier for you to move to Germany if you don't speak German, which is a big hurdle, a big obstacle in traditional real estate when you apply in a regular way. So we have a basic set of documentation of verification that you can pretty much upload with a very convenient self-service process as a potential customer to us, and then we verify that in our backend. This is also being done automatically. What you have to do is you're submitting your preferences. For instance, the time you want to move in, the date your new contract or your new working contract in that particular city starts, your budget, your ideal roommate setup, Like, are you more interested in 1 or 2 roommates, or do you want a co-living space as big as possible with maybe 6, 7, or 8 roommates, so you can make as many new friends and build your social network as quickly as possible. And then we do a qualification call with you. So one of our community managers is going to reach out to you. So this is like a 10, 15-minute interview. And then we basically offer you to sign a contract with us. So the approach is much more convenient and also much more consumer friendly in this case, that we rely less on bureaucracy and more on technology compared to what I would call the traditional way of renting an apartment.
That pretty much sounds like it would be the ideal way of a student, an intern looking to rent space for some time in Frankfurt, as well as a tech professional who just got his first job there to actually get their apartment on time digitally, or at least a space in an apartment. Sebastian, it was just a pleasure talking to you. Everybody who would like to learn more can go down here in the show notes. There'll be a link, as I said, to your LinkedIn profile, as well as to Homefully. And in how many languages is Homefully available right now?
In German and in English. As soon as we expand to other countries, we're also going to add more languages.
Sounds pretty good. So in German and in English, go down here in the show notes and you will be able to digitally secure your living space wherever you get an internship or a job. Sebastian, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you as a guest.
Your time and having me on your podcast.
If you are a professional looking at the European startup scene, Germany is a place you cannot miss. Fortunately for you, there is Startuprad.io, the authority on German startups. This English-only podcast brings you fresh interviews each week. Most likely, you have never heard or read anything on these startups before in English, but you will in the future. Be ahead of the curve and subscribe to Startuprad.io podcast, or check for the Startuprad.io internet radio station. Check your Alexa for the Startuprad.io skill as well.